This is Old Mountain Media.
It's August 1995. Picture yourself as a teenager, skipping out on the humdrum preparation of the oncoming school year in the next few weeks, enjoying the last bit of freedom before school takes over your life. You're hiking the hills between the towns of Camaracks and Whitefish in the wilds of the Yukon Territory in northern Canada. It's a brisk 12 degrees Celsius, and the air is biting at your ears, despite the time of year. Fall and winter are lingering on the horizon of inevitable cold and dark months to come. You and your best friend Tiffany are about to start your senior year and haven't made up your mind about what will come after graduation. You've been able to hold down a summer job at the local grocery outlet, and today was a well-earned day off. Before you and Tiffany took up your favorite trail, you snuck into your mother's purse and grabbed a half-empty pack of cigarettes. She'd kill you if she knew you were smoking. As you and Tiffany make your way through the thick forests of tall aspens with bright green leaves dancing on the wind, you find a small stump on the side of a trail. Tiffany sits next to you, and you pull out your mom's cigarettes. God, I can't believe school's about to start. I know. I'm so not looking forward to it. You think you'll get old Perkins again for science? I hope not. Ew. I'm sick of his constant lectures. I just want to blow stuff up. Better than Mr. Sanders. Do you know he actually told us that dogs don't have emotions? He hasn't met Lucifer yet. What a nut job. Yeah, well, Lucifer is kind of insane. Ever heard of a pug attacking a husky before? I swear your dog's got a death wish. I think it's because he's angry at you because you put him on a diet. So, no emotions? Yeah, I think not. You both laugh and continue talking about the events of the summer. It's been an interesting one for sure. Reports of some odd creatures in the area have come in, reminding you of the legends told by the First Nations members of the northern Tutchone people who have made their home along the Yukon River for thousands of years. You each smoke 3 cigarettes, stand up, and decide to head back to the car. The breeze starts to pick up, and the sun is suddenly covered by a dark cloud threatening rain. As you make your way back to the gravel road where the car sits, something comes over you. A stink overwhelms your senses and causes your stomach to do circles, forcing saliva into your mouth. You think you might vomit. What is that smell? You ask Tiffany. She stands in a trance. There's a Sasquatch, she says slowly and quietly. She then snaps out of her daze, and like a bullet from a gun, she sprints down the gravel road, leaving you and the car behind. You turn to face where she was looking, not able to conjure a sound, and from behind a tall tree, you see a shadow of a man cross the trail you had just walked down. It's covered in black and brown hair, and its waist is higher than your head, a full 5 foot 2 inches. You've been to this area many times. In fact, you've hiked it alone, and have heard some sort of footsteps near you, but you always assumed it was an elk or a moose, common animals of the area. The sound of footsteps grows louder, as if the creature is getting closer to you. It's hiding behind the thick trees, and you squint your eyes to try to make out what it could be. You know you should run after Tiffany, but something is drawing you in and forcing you to stay put. The footsteps stop. You take a few steps toward the trail, and the footsteps commence. As soon as you stop, the steps stop again. It must be mimicking me, you think to yourself. Suddenly, you hear a grunt and a crash of bushes. The creature emerges from the cover of trees and stands directly in front of you. You take a step backwards, tripping on a root sticking up from the ground. You fall on your backside, taking your eyes off the creature, and as you brace yourself with your hands, you look back to where the creature was. It's gone. You slowly climb to your feet and brush yourself off. If Tiffany is right, that this is a Sasquatch, it's a happening that your grandmother, a member of the northern Tutchone tribe, will be happy to hear. She has often told you stories of the hairy man of the wilderness, or as she calls it, the Bushman. Your heart thumping and your brow sweating, you climb into your car, sit in silence for a few moments to gather your wits, and start the engine to go find Tiffany. The legends are true. Grandma's story is real. And the Bushman's here.
Pacific Northwest Sasquatch Shadows presents Something Cryptid This Way Comes.
Deep in the heart of northern Canada, there lies a town, the town of Whitehorse in the Yukon Territory. This town sits between rolling hills of sharp cliffs, frozen tundra, and dark shadows that seem to stretch beyond the horizon. A 12-hour drive directly east from Anchorage, Alaska, the sun lingers in the sky nearly 19 hours a day in the summer months. The town is the largest city in northern Canada, with close to 25,000 year-round residents. The weather is much more mild than the surrounding communities of Yellowknife and Carcross Cutoff, and residents pride themselves in their fertility and stamina when the dark days of winter arrive every autumn. The history of this town spans to its incorporation in 1898, but documented evidence shows that the First Nations people have been in the area for thousands of years. Whitehorse sits on the shores of the Yukon River near the base of three mountains: Grey Mountain to the east, Mount Sumanik to the northwest, and Golden Horn Mountain to the south. Every summer, tourists would travel to Whitehorse to observe the Frantic Follies vaudeville revue before it went under. And every winter, dog sled competitors still take part in the Yukon Quest, a 1,000-mile race starting in Whitehorse and ending in Fairbanks, Alaska. The race is considered one of the toughest races in the world, and when you meet a resident of Whitehorse, you soon discover the tenacity and spirit of the Great North that residents carry with them. And that is exactly how the subject of our first story considers himself, a rugged and resourceful individual who, at the age of 15, found himself face to face with the Bushmen of the Yukon Territory. It's August 1978, and Jason, a strapping young man and avid fisherman, has decided to head out in the bright afternoon to cast his line and fetch dinner for he and his father, a helicopter pilot for Trans-North Yukon Air. Jason usually spends his winters with his mother down in British Columbia, but cherishes his time with his father during the summer months. As Jason set out, he grabbed his pole, his tackle box, and thermos of iced tea and a bag of chips. He had just finished reading the book Sasquatch by Don Hunter and Renee DeHinden, and loved the idea of the giant that lived in the woods. While he was sometimes a bit frightened as he headed out to the wilderness, he also was excited to be out in the land where the creature supposedly lived, according to local natives and local legend. As he set out, he worked his way through the brush and tall grass that lined the Yukon River, and started his way north. After a 15-minute hike, Jason found himself at a small utility shed and used this marker to turn directly west and head to the bank of the river. The sun was sitting on the horizon, making its way across the trees. The golden light cast long shadows across the landscape, hinting at sinking behind the hills, but as typical in the summer, floating on top of the trees as a leaf floats on the water, ready to sink, but never submerging. As he approached the river, he found himself surrounded by large boulders. He glanced back at the utility shed as he climbed through the large rocks, making sure not to lose his bearings. He saw something that would haunt his mind, his dreams, his every waking moment, with an image that conjures thoughts of tribal ritual, an occult-like ceremony.
What is that? I gotta get out of here.
Jason thought to himself, but he couldn't move. Something was anchoring him to the spot, and while his mind told him to run, his body could not react. He felt like he was stuck in a glass box, surrounded by thick air, forcing him into a physical state of paralyzed fear while his mind raced 100 miles per hour. He forced himself to take 2 steps backwards, but immediately froze once more. He couldn't take his eyes off of what he was seeing, try as he might, and he knew that this was a vision he'd never be able to expel from his mind. A tall, dark figure was standing only 200 feet away. It was pacing around a tree, looking up at the branches and then down at the ground. The creature was at least 7 feet tall and had the build of a triathlete, muscular but trim at the same time. The hair on its head flowed down past its shoulders, and the rest of its body seemed to be covered in a light wisp of black hair. As it continued looking up and then down, Jason made sure he was hidden behind a boulder, barely peeking out from behind it to keep a safe distance. The creature showed no signs of awareness to Jason's presence and continued moving around, looking up and down. Then, without warning, the creature began to jump up and down. Jason could almost feel the ground shake beneath him. With every landing of its massive feet, the ground around the tree shook. Leaves from the aspen trees fell to the ground in a shower of green, and the ominous sound of the pounding feet shook the core of Jason's confidence. He was sure he was going to die, but he kept watching. The creature stopped jumping and began to wave its long arms in the air, back and forth, at the same time from left to right, in what seemed to be a choreographed motion with purpose. It began to prance as if in a tribal dance, its legs bending at the knee and lifting, one at a time, up to its shoulder height. The repeated high kicks and waving arms continued. Jason let out a gasp, barely audible to himself, and the creature froze. Suddenly, it stood tall, facing away from Jason, but slowly and steadily, it turned its head to the left, like an owl, until it was looking directly towards Jason's hiding spot.
Can it see me?
Jason was reluctant to duck his head below the boulder. He knew any sudden movement would give his position away, although his gasp probably already did. Did the creature hear him? Could it see him? Did it feel his presence? Cold sweat began to drop down from Jason's brow. As he stared at the creature, the sweat was dripping into his eyes, but he dared not wipe it away. The creature tilted its head to the left, as if refocusing its eyesight to discover the origin of Jason's gasp. The face of the creature was almost human. Jason could tell it was confused by the wrinkles on its forehead. It looked worried, but angry at the same time. Its scowl was burning a hole in Jason's direction. The face of a human, but with a flatter nose like a gorilla or other primate. Jason knew what he was looking at. The Bushman of the Yukon. After what seemed an eternity, the creature rotated its head back in the direction of the aspen tree and began its dance once more.
Is this thing crazy? Why the hell is Bigfoot dancing? What is this? Oh my god. Maybe it's a mating dance. Is there another one nearby?
Jason quickly looked to his left and right, expecting to see another Bigfoot, but saw no signs. He figured, like the great male peacock that struts its stuff in order to attract a female, this creature was doing the same thing. But he saw no other creature. It had stopped its dance and was looking straight up at the tree. Slowly, the creature raised its unusually long arms up toward the closest branch, at least 12 feet off the ground. It crouched and immediately sprung into the air, grabbing at the branch. It caught the limbs in its massive hands, and a loud crack filled the air. The branch broke, and the creature fell to the ground, the limb crashing on top of it. A loud grunt filled the air, followed by the sound of a deep and agonizing outburst of pain.
That's it. Time to get out of here.
Jason knew that the time had come to run. He grabbed his fishing pole, his tackle box, and what was left of his confidence and bravery, and started to run. After he made the 15-minute hike back to the edge of town in less than 10 minutes, Jason stopped at the site of the post office, a bright white building that looked like it was 100 years old. His clothes were as wet as if he had just swam across the Yukon River. His body shaking and stomach aching, his mind wouldn't stop racing.
No one's gonna believe this.
Over the next few weeks, Jason mentioned his experience to a few friends and a few family members. He was met with ridicule and doubt, even though the Bushmen of the Yukon is a common story elders tell to their youth. No one believed a Bigfoot would dance. But it wasn't just a dance, as Jason would recall to himself. It was some sort of ceremony, a choreographed expression, a haunting ritual that would stick with him the rest of his days. Jason went on with his life, becoming a CEO of an IT company and repeating his story to less than a handful of others about his experience. It took him 30 years to come forward formally with this story. He knew how he would be viewed, how he would be mocked. Stories like these tend to bring out the worst in people who tend to believe they have all the answers to the universe, to those that think within one dimension and are too self-assured or too scared to consider what is and what might be lurking in the dark trees around them. Because that's what happened to our next subject, 14 years after Jason's encounter. Patrick and his mother would never be the same after the summer of 1992.
Patrick, you've got to slow down. Sorry, Mom. I'm just so used to these trails. I'll keep it slower.
It's 1992, and Patrick was taking his mother for a hike just outside his hometown of Whitehorse. The two cherished moments like this, hanging out, just the two of them, reminiscing about the days when he was younger. Shelley, Patrick's mother, would tell stories of her youth in the various areas of the Yukon and the neighboring state of Alaska, and just have a great time listening to the sounds that accompany hikers in these glorious hills. Patrick was an experienced hunter and outdoorsman, and he felt right at home whenever he was in the shadows of the forest. Giant pine, aspen, and cedar trees provided a labyrinth of possibilities, and every time he journeyed to the woods, he was excited to discover something new, whether it be a species of mushroom, a patch of golden berries, or even bear, moose, or mountain lion tracks. There was always something waiting right around the corner for Patrick, and this hike would be no exception. The evening was setting in, and while the sun remained above the horizon, the eerie long shadows created hungry stripes of darkness across the landscape, eating everything in sight. Patrick and Shelley had finished a bowl of Shelley's famous stew that was known throughout her neighborhood and much of Whitehorse, and this post-meal hike was just what they needed to enjoy an evening together. Mother and son, hiking together, enjoying all that the wilderness had to offer. The trail they had followed was an old logging road that had been squeezed in from each side by bushes, saplings, and trees that fought for a ray of sunshine like a swimmer reaching from the depths of water, desperate for air. From side to side, the trail wound through trees and large boulders that were covered in lichen, with remnants of moss flaking off the sides and landing on the trail. Patrick loved this trail, but was thinking about his aging mother that struggled to keep up. As he looked ahead, the path would turn left just when he thought he would see an opening. And when he reached that turn, the path would then turn right. There was no time that he could look ahead and see more than 80 feet of trail in front of him, or behind him. The side-winding shape of the trail created a sense of anticipation, wondering what the next twist would bring. Shelley loved to collect old bottles, and Patrick knew that there was an old logging site, sometimes used as a dump, somewhere out here. Even with the overgrown logging trail, he had heard ATVs driving up and down the trail, most likely dumping trash, or heading up the side of the 6,000-foot base of Joe Mountain. Finally, they found the dump. The trees had opened up, and the sun, despite its angle at this hour, poked through the clouds and shone beams of light across the small clearing. As they approached the area, Shelley saw broken bottles scattered across the ground.
Patrick, look at all these. I see, Mom, but I think most of them are broken. Oh, yes, you're right. Well, no such luck today, I suppose. Should we head back? Well, I guess we can. Yeah, I have some more of that chili waiting for us. Ugh, Mom, I'm stuffed. You keep fattening me up even though I come out here to work it off. I guess that's why I exercise, so I can keep eating your food. I suppose you're right, Patrick. Yep, let's go before the dark sets in.
Patrick and Shelley turned around and prepared for their hike back to the house.
Patrick, do you think there are bears out here this time of year? Well, I'm not worried, Mom. I didn't see any on my hike yesterday. Didn't see any tracks either. We're safe.
They continued down the path, Patrick walking about 50 feet in front of his mother. He was confident they were safe, but he wanted to make sure his mom was too. Bringing up the bears put a twinge of doubt in his mind.
Are we safe?
After the fifth turn in the trail, Patrick noticed a person standing upright, just off the path, a mere 80 feet away. He stopped in his tracks and turned to look at his mother. She also stopped, but had a concerning look on her face. She looked worried, and yet confused.
You okay, Mom? Huh? Yeah, I'm fine. I just got this weird feeling, like some electricity shot through me.
Shelley continued up the trail, making her way up to Patrick. He turned back around and looked ahead. He turned again to look in the direction they were heading, and saw the person standing there, not moving. Expecting the hiker to approach and say hello, Patrick raised his hand to wave.
Hey there! How's it going?
Most folks in this area know each other, and he assumed he would see who it was. But the sun was directly behind the person, causing a black silhouette to appear, with hardly any details. Patrick thought this was an odd-looking hiker. He figured the hiker was wearing large black coveralls, an odd choice for a summer hike, and noticed a huge mop of hair hanging down around the shoulders. Compared to the trees next to the stranger, he realized this was not a typical resident of Whitehorse. This individual must have been at least 7 or 8 feet tall.
There's no way that's possible,
he thought to himself. All of a sudden, the stranger started rocking back and forth, shifting its weight from side to side. But as it did this, its head stayed in one place. It was unworldly, and the move seemed almost like a dance, like a ceremony. Patrick noticed steam coming from its mouth, or rather, where the mouth should be, and its chest began to rise. Deep, heavy breathing and grunting followed the movement, and that is when Patrick realized what he was looking at.
It's a bushman. It's a Sasquatch. Patrick, what is it? Do you see something?
Shelley was still making her way back up to Patrick. She couldn't make out what her son was transfixed by, but continued up to his side.
I'm not sure, Mom. There's something there.
He was not about to tell his mother that he saw a bushman. She would lose it. Shelley stopped 20 feet from Patrick's side. She bent down to pick up some wild heather, common in these areas, and Patrick was glad for her distraction. He was starting to feel a bit shaky and weird inside. Suddenly, the bushman stopped moving, its arms still at its side, and the two stared at each other. The eyes were still hidden by the sun directly behind the bushman, but Patrick sensed it was staring straight into his soul.
The stories are true.
He didn't want to admit to himself what he was seeing, but he knew he had to face reality, or he might die. He broke out of his trance.
I've got to protect Mom. She can't see this thing.
His mother's safety came before his own, and he was intent on protecting her. The creature began to step forward towards Patrick. Still out of the sight of Shelley, the bushman was approaching slowly, each footstep shaking the ground beneath it. The breath was visible coming out of its nose, 2 streams of steam exiting its nostrils. Details of its face were becoming clear. Patrick turned to check on his mother, and she was staring directly at him. He knew if he told her, the situation could turn into chaos. But she knew. Somehow, he knew that she was aware of what was in front of her son. After taking a few strides toward Patrick, the creature moved off the trail, pushing through bushes, and within seconds, was gone. When it left his sight, Patrick felt a heaviness lift in his chest, like a weight was lifted. Shelley made her way up to his side, and the two walked in silence, both knowing what they had seen, and considering how close they might have been to danger, and even death. As they hiked home, Patrick thought about the legend of the bushman in Whitehorse he had heard since he was young. For years, stories were told of a creature that would visit the town at night, stalking small animals and chasing cars that roamed the streets. He'd always assumed these tales were conjured by the locals to warn children to be careful in case a bear or mountain lion should attack. But he never considered the stories to be true. And yet, they were. Now he knew that he would never be alone in the woods, in the hungry shadows of Whitehorse and the valleys of the great Northern Territories in Canada. Now he knew the horror in the Yukon. For Old Mountain Media and Pacific Northwest Sasquatch Shadows, this has been Something Cryptid This Way Comes. I'm your host, Dr. Russ, writer, producer, and sound engineer. If you like the show, please leave a 5-star rating and a review, and be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, and all over your social media. To learn more about Whitehorse and the history of the Yukon, check out Pierre Burton's book, The Klondike Fever, Life and Death of the Last Great Gold Rush, as well as Ed Farrell's book, Strange Stories of Alaska and the Yukon, both available wherever fine books are sold. Patreon is coming, where members will have access to early episodes, interviews with guests, a new writer's blog, and many other exciting materials that will only be available through a membership. Keep your eyes peeled on our Instagram and Facebook, as well as in the episode notes. If you have a potential story to share, one you'd like to hear set to a storytelling format, or would even like to discuss sponsorship, send an email to pnwsasquatchshadows@yahoo.com or russ@ommstories.com. Music used in this episode is by Alexander Nakarada, Anton Shiloh, and Ronald Ka. They've got an amazing playlist available on YouTube exploring music influenced by Scandinavian folk and traditional music. See the links in the episode notes for more details. Thanks for listening to Horror in the Yukon. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember, if you ever travel to the northern mountains of Canada, you might just find yourself face to face with a bushman who might be dancing and conjuring the unknown. If I were you, I'd back away slowly. But maybe he just needs a dance partner. Tango, anyone?
Something Cryptid This Way Comes is a production of Old Mountain Media. Visit us on Instagram at PNW Sasquatch Shadows and Facebook at Old Mountain Media.
Something cryptid this way comes.